Hi, welcome to Living Clean Podcast, the show to help you feel good again. I'm your host, Bonnie Wilderson-Hayes. I'm a speaker, certified holistic nutritionist, and founder of Living Clean's healthy lifestyle transformation and nutrition programs. Each week, we will destroy myths and share the truth about the food you're buying and consuming, and provide insight into the best food programs to avoid slowing you down. My purpose is to help you enjoy food again and finally achieve the results that you want. I believe that everyone deserves to enjoy mouth-watering, good-for-you food that doesn't send you running for relief. Now, let's get started. Hey guys, it's Bonnie. This week, I want to talk to you guys about digestion. I know we talked a little bit about leaky gut, a lot about leaky gut last week. So I kind of wanted to chat with you about digestion and metabolism and why certain foods are harder to metabolize and digest than others. It all comes down to simple biology. It comes down to the structure of the cells that make up the thing that you're eating, whether it's plants or it's animal. So animals are complex beings. Our molecules, our cells, while they, under a microscope, can look very much like a plant, they're a little bit different. So let's say you're eating red meat versus chicken versus fish. Why do people say that red meat is so difficult to digest? Have you considered that? It's because of the specific molecules and cellular structures that make up the muscle that we eat. And that's what we're eating. When we're eating animals, we are eating their muscle, okay? Don't mean to gross anyone out, but it being what it is, we are eating their muscle. So when the muscular structure is more dense, it's more complex, there is a greater intellect involved in its production, growth, strengthening, then it's going to be more difficult for us to digest. So with chicken and fish, our bodies tend to digest it relatively easily. Plant proteins, plant food in general is very, very, very easy for us to digest. I've had clients who over the years have said, I went vegetarian or I went vegan and I want to add meat back in. A few of them try to go right out and have a steak. And our bodies are pretty fragile in situations like that. And I don't mean fragile like you're going to break something. I mean fragile like your body gets used to a specific way of doing things. And it's not happy trying something new at the flip of a switch. If any of you are introverts and you notice that when you experience change, you're not really happy about it, kind of resort to rebelling a little bit, or you get grumpy, or you lash out, or anything where you kind of get a little passive aggressive. Well, our bodies are exactly like our conscious selves. Our conscious selves act out when we do not want to do something. Our subconscious self is what manages that. It's the structure that says, oh, we don't like that. So here you go, conscious. Do this, do this, do this. It eggs us on. Well, digestion is no different, all right? If we feed our bodies a plant-based diet forever, and then we turn around and for a week, we eat processed foods or we start eating a significant amount of animal proteins when we hadn't before, our bodies are going to shut down until it can figure out what the heck is going on. So a couple of things you need to know. Plant proteins actually digest within our stomach. Animal proteins can not digest until they are in the later stages. So red meat, for instance, red meat doesn't digest or break up significantly until it hits the small intestine, until it hits that duodenum, where it can break up a little bit more. The stomach acid doesn't break it up as much as we would like to think it does. As you can tell, when you chew a piece of red meat, you notice that the only thing that really breaks it up is our mastication process, the chewing. It's called mastication. Okay. You're mashing it up with your teeth, you're tearing it apart, and then you're swallowing it. So if you ever notice when you swallow a piece of red meat, if you haven't chewed it up enough, it's going to get stuck in your throat. And the liquids, the saliva that's produced and the liquids within your gut, they're not going to digest it enough to let it just slide down your throat. You've got to either push it out through the Heimlich maneuver or hope that it goes straight down into your stomach, where it's going to go through a process in your stomach. It breaks up a little bit, but it's so minimal. It's not even something that registers in a lot of our anatomy and physiology books. Instead, what we're taught is that the red meat digestion process does not begin until it hits your small intestines. Chicken is no different, neither is pork. And any of the wild game that you see, whether it is white meat or red meat, it still doesn't really begin digestion till it hits that small intestine. So when you're going through and you're trying to figure out what's going to be the easiest thing to digest, and how can I restore my body either after being ill for a long time, like for instance you have the flu, chicken broth along with vital micronutrients from spinach and kale and peas and carrots and celery and peppers. I mean, those, you put all those together and you got chicken noodle soup minus the noodles. And it's really helpful. The nutrients that are found within it are helpful for healing our body. Chicken in its soup like that is actually cut up into bite-sized portions. So it's a little easier for our bodies to digest. The molecules that make up chicken muscle, they're not as dense as the red meat and the beef and, the bison and stuff that's out there that's red meat. It's actually less complex, more complex than the fish, less complex than the red meat. So it's a little easier to digest. And with the micronutrients that come within chicken and the veggies, it makes it easier for us to recuperate from things like the flu or, a sinus cold or something like that, where we need a large infusion of micronutrients to really boost our immune system and kick whatever's happening out of our bodies. All right. That's our immune system is our police. Our immune system says, you're not wanting here, get your butt out. And it kicks you out. It uses the white blood cells as its soldiers, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you need either herbal intervention or you need a pharmaceutical. So knowing what's going to digest easiest in your system, especially when you're hitting times where you're either sick or you're going through a cleanse, is really important, because if you start eating foods during a cleanse and you're focusing mostly on strict clean eating, I'm not going to go into all the different things that are out there. There's a million different ways to eliminate and cleanse and all that. But let's say you're going strictly with a clean eating cleanse and an elimination. You want to eat foods that are going to be easy to digest, because part of what you're trying to do in that case is give your body a break. So when you're recovering from the flu, you're recovering from sinus infections, major illnesses, colds that knock you out and actually force you into bed. All right. We're not talking the common cold that sends you out and you can walk around and you're normal, you just got a little sniffle. We're talking about the things that send you into bed. All right. When we're talking about that, you need to do whatever is possible to help your body heal. We are amazing healing structures. We can self-heal like nobody's business, but we have to give ourselves the nourishment to be able to do so. And by using and consuming foods that are easier to digest, we're better able to heal ourselves. So when you're looking at digesting food and going into a cleanse or recovering from a cold, trying to figure out what's happening with your body when you're dealing with a significant amount of things, or let's say you've done an elimination and your reintroduction went bad. Something happened, either a mistake happened or there was something you didn't notice and something happened. And now you're taking a step back, which happens. You go forward, you go back through eliminations. When you have to do that, you want to try and consume foods that are as easy to digest as possible. So looking at protein sources specifically, because carbohydrates and vegetables and fats, those are all fairly simple. Stay away from your trans fats. Make sure you're eating a lot of unsaturated fats. Minimize the saturated fats. And then with the carbohydrates, just stay away from the gluten and the simple carbs. With proteins, if you're looking at things that are going to be easier to digest, you want to look at the molecules that make up the structures. So plant-based proteins, things that come from spinach and kale and artichokes and asparagus, things like that, those are going to be the easiest proteins to digest. Beans are easy to digest, but something to keep in mind is there are chemical structures within the bean makeup that when you combine it with a wheat, whether that is a gluten or a non-gluten wheat, what happens is it actually creates a situation where it's easier to digest. Otherwise, it can kind of cause issues within your digestive tract, whether you're used to eating them or you're not. All right. So be careful with beans if you're sick or if you're on a cleanse, just because if you don't have that wheat structure in, it might cause you some digestive discomfort, some cramping, very light cramping or gassiness, which we all know, you eat your beans and you toot. Beyond that, once you get through the plant-based and the beans, then you go into your fish and your shellfish. The structures of fish sit in water. They are actually pretty malleable when it comes to hitting stomach acid. So once the fish hits your stomach acid, it starts to get broken up because the molecules that make up the fish muscles that we actually eat, they're not as complex as your chicken and your pork and your red meats. So they're easier for our stomachs to actually break up before it hits our intestines. From there, you go into chicken is actually next, and then pork, and then all the red meats. Now, as far as red meat goes, and hold on, let's back up. With chicken, I mean chicken, turkey, poultry, any sort of bird out there. It's going to be easier to digest than red meat, but not easier to digest than fish. So it sits between, birds sit between your fish digestion and your red meat. When we're looking at red meat, you also have to consider how it was grown. Our bodies process grass-fed, range-fed, happy cows and happy wild meat easier than we do the antibiotic fed, the cows that were grown in mass markets. There is something about living organisms that when we are placed in a stressful situation, a confined situation, we do not like to be in a crushed area. We do not like to be treated certain ways, whether we are human beings or we are other animals and living organisms. This is an actual energetic situation that has been documented in scientific studies. Yeah, most of what we have to deal with red meat comes from the things that are fed to the cattle, but it also has to do with their mindset. And I realize they're simple beings. My grandpa grew cows and had dairy cows my whole life. So I get that they're simple beings, but our innate intuition and the things that we were created with years ago when we were Homo sapiens are very similar to what they have within their intuition as well. We're social beings, but we don't want to sit in crowded places for too long. We're not happy, and happiness affects how things are grown. So when you look at your meat, it may sound woo-woo and frou-frou to some of you to hear me say any of this, but this is actually something that you need to consider. So when you look at this, not only is it better for you to eat grass-fed sources, range-raised, farm-raised, where they can just go and be happy cows, happy bison, happy deer, whatever. But it's also very important to look at what they're being fed. So obviously, no fake junk. And you don't want them to only eat hay. They are vegetarians. But, a lot of what they eat, the grasses that they eat, have minerals from the dirt. So if you ever look at a cow after he eats grass from the ground, his whole snout is covered in dirt. So they don't just eat the grass, they actually get some dirt in there. And if you haven't done this, and especially if you have children, if you go out to a cow farm or a farm that raises cows, whether they're dairy cows or otherwise, watch them eat. And when they lift their nose up, the whole front of their face is covered in dirt. The kids will love it and laugh, and you'll understand that they're actually eating minerals that come from that dirt. It can come from bugs that are in there. It can come from the grass that's grown, but it comes from somewhere. And, bison and other wild game eat those as well. And that's what gives us the best quality meat. So if we have a high quality meat, whether we are talking about red meat, poultry, fish, regardless of what it is, choose the wholesome, high quality foods because your body, A, deserves it, and B, it will be so much easier for it to digest. If you have any questions, as always, let me know. Otherwise, I will talk to you all next week. Thank you for listening. Did you love this episode? If so, share this with a friend or someone you think would find it helpful. Leave a review on iTunes, Anchor, Stitcher, or Google Play, and let me know your honest thoughts, questions, and takeaways. Not a fan? I'd still love to hear your feedback. Disagree with anything you've heard? I would love to hear your experience on social media. If you feel like you're still struggling with your health goals, send me a message or check out livingclean.com for details about our nutrition and well-being programs for busy lifestyles. Stop struggling and start enjoying food again. See you next time.
The podcast you just heard was published with Anchor. Got something you want to say to the creator of this show? Send them a voice message using the Anchor app, free for iOS and Android.